Today, we're talking about why you need a coach and whether or not you do need a coach at all, but also going into the fact that Les and I are now coaching each other
Yeah.
and why we're doing that and things along those lines and what we expect from each other and what you can expect from getting a coach, specifically from us, of course, but also from any coach and how you can find someone that will be good for you and good for your progress.
Buckle up and get ready to smash your health and fitness goals. This is FortitudeRx Radio, bringing you engaging conversations that inspire you to take action and take control. Physical and mental resilience, strength, nutrition, rehab, mindset, and more. We've got the prescription. This is FortitudeRx Radio. Here are your hosts, Tyler Campbell and Les Keyes.
So like I mentioned, Les and I are both coaching each other. He brought this up to me a few weeks ago when we were just like sitting there, received a text, and I'd been thinking about this as well, actually. I was like, I need a coach. I've been spinning my wheels for too long, sort of just not doing much on my own. And I received a text from him that said, we should coach each other, very simply. I was like, that sounds like a great idea, actually. I didn't know that he would be thinking about getting coaching either, so I wasn't thinking about coaching each other. But because we're both coaches, because we both have similar ideas behind coaching and experience with being a lifter, it sounded like a great idea to me. So we sort of talked about it and what we can expect from each other, things along those lines. And we started just this past week. I've only done one of the workouts as of this recording. I think Les has done two of them, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to kind of go into, what we're experiencing so far, obviously, is mostly just communication on how to get started with it and what we're sort of doing in general over the long haul with it.
Yeah, so I have had coaching plenty before, but in regards to specifically strength coaching, I've only really had one coach. And when I decided to make that first transition, I was kind of just in a rut. I tend to focus more on my athletes, and I don't really put much time into actually structuring my training. So it's just kind of in my head of, I kind of think I need to work on these things, but typically I'll just end up doing what I feel like doing. But like Tyler said, you kind of end up spinning your wheels and you really start to get away from the stuff that you need to do. And then training just doesn't really become fun because you don't really feel like you're being pushed and you don't really feel like you're getting anywhere. So it was honestly just time for me to make that transition again, because I want to say for the past 16 months, I'd say 12 months of that, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was very objective about my training. I went into a meet prep. I knew what to do for that. But then once I got done with that meet prep, I went back to just kind of doing what I felt like doing. And I knew I needed to hold myself accountable. And the only way to hold myself accountable was to have a like-minded individual help me do so. And I'm super particular about who I'm going to hire as a coach or recommend people that aren't me, because I want to find an individual that's open-minded and is going to communicate and not just say well, this is my method and this is how I'm going to do things. So it was a clear choice because both of us are very like-minded and we're both very open to communicating and just trying each other's stuff out and trusting each other. That's really the biggest thing is if you trust somebody, even if the game plan isn't that great, the trust is still going to kind of lead down some path to success.
My thing is definitely trust and communication as the two main factors. It's hard to trust someone you don't know, obviously, when it comes to just hiring a coach outright online or whatever it may be, even if it's an in-person personal trainer or something like that. They may just be selling you on something real quick, and it's hard to trust that. But when I'd been coached before, it was by a friend and someone who I could communicate with really well. So it was an obvious trust and communication factor there for me. And so for Les, it's the same way. And that's why I sort of am okay with being coached. So I would say in my past athletic experience, I'm not a super coachable person. And that's why I didn't excel specifically in things like team sports. And even in individual sports, it was still kind of rocky for listening to other people tell me how to get better. And so that's probably why I didn't excel, is that I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I knew how to do it and get better, but I didn't get as good as I could have been probably. And so that's kind of part of it for me is I spent about a year under my other friend as a coach, about I think it's 7 years ago now. I thought it was a lot shorter when I was thinking about it, but I looked back on my logs and I was like, oh, this has actually been an entire year. And I did make pretty good progress. And so not having those like 6 years in between of not doing it, I kind of find myself just hitting like good pockets of training where I think it just sort of happened to line up. I probably did something correct without really thinking about it. Like I had written programs for myself and I did well on those programs. But when I do hit those pockets of not really having a dedicated programming cycle like I would do for clients, and I'm just sort of messing around, you do tend to hit some PRs at some point because you just happen to do things right. And when you do that, you become entertained by it. I think like you're like, okay, this is going well, it's fine. But if you look back in retrospect, you kind of just see that you haven't done the right things like 80% of the time, and you haven't really made progress for most of that time.
Yeah.
It's just that you can see those sort of pockets of success, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like you start to chase that like euphoric feeling of like, all right, I might have gotten lucky and got a few things right, and this one day went good. So now I have momentum, and I'm gonna like keep trying to like chip these PRs and stuff. But what will happen is you didn't really put in much time of like real good structured work. So that one day was kind of just a lucky day. So now you're expecting that lucky day to be your standard, and then you just get in this constant loop of like shooting for the same stuff and missing it, and so on and so forth. Um, yeah, it's nice though just to like I was actually excited because I was able to just look at something and just be told what to do instead of having to think like on my way to the gym or whatever. Like, all right, I kind of know what I want to work on today, but how am I going to structure this? Like now I don't even have to think about it. I'm just excited to go work out. And plus, I honestly felt like I was tested even more than some of the workouts that I thought I was making hard on myself. I objectively wasn't really like pushing myself that hard. So it was actually really fun to have just a couple of different exercises in there and be told like, no, like you actually need to work a little bit harder.
Yeah, and that's what I experienced the workout already, and I know that looking at the week, it'll be the same way. I think a big part of it for the powerlifters out there that are listening to this is the idea that you have to you're being held accountable. Of course, is one part of it we'll get into, but knowing that even if you don't write down that you hit a certain weight or that you did your accessories or whatever it may be, if you're doing this by yourself, it is very, very easy to skip accessories and the little things and stuff like that, or like just sort of sandbag a few things. But if you have someone writing your program for you, it's almost just this extra bump to make sure that you actually do what's written. If you wrote it, it kind of is like you can go back on your own word, but you can't go back on someone else's word for you. It's a lot easier to just sort of talk yourself into doing all the work you're supposed to do when someone else is waiting for you to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Going back to the idea of sort of just messing around in the gym, for me is definitely my biggest part of all this, is that I've been training for like 16 years. I would almost argue that like half of that time off and on was just me having fuck around-itis, where you just sort of do whatever and hope that it works out. And it's because you're busy with other things. This is sort of the whole thing we're going to go into of like, you're a normal, actual human being, no matter how much you love working out or not, you still have days where you're not going to be thinking so much about that workout, or you're not going to care for months at a time. Even if you're trying to care about it, you might retrospectively look back and be like, wow, that didn't really do anything for me. I've been just sort of messing around. And it kind of is frustrating in that sense that you might be spinning your wheels, especially as someone who doesn't have specific strength goals or objective goals, where you might be like, why am I not losing weight, or why am I not gaining muscle? And it's kind of just not especially enjoyable when you look back on it. And it's very easy, even as someone who has exercise built into who they are, I can have a lot of chunks of time where I'm frustrated by training and falling behind on caring about it at all. So I think that's a big part of this, is that knowing that that's a normal feeling, even coming from someone who has a passion for lifting, basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, I care about this stuff so much that I wanted to make my job out of it, like make my whole career. And I actually found that when I first started with this whole coaching thing, the amount of time that I worked out went down dramatically. I went from working out 5, 6, 7 days a week every single day, absolutely loved it, getting after it, trying to help people as much as I can. On top of that, to okay, this is now like legitimately my job. And you would think that if you're surrounded by it all the time, like, oh, cool, now I can work out whenever. But it actually became very physically and mentally draining to put so much time and effort into everyone else's coaching and training, and that I stopped really caring as much about mine and not really putting myself as a priority. And I just kept telling myself like, oh, I just don't really have the time, or oh, I need to put my energy into other people. It's selfish for me to focus on myself. And I actually found that it was more selfish to not take care of myself, because like my actual product went down. Like I wasn't as good at programming. I wasn't as good at coaching when I'm not taking care of myself. So by simply, handing things over to you, and you making me work hard, I now just work harder on everybody else's stuff as well.
Yeah, I think that's just a mental bandwidth issue, that when you're worried about yourself, that changes basically when you have other people relying on you. So what it looks like when you're taking care of yourself, when you don't have anyone to rely on you, is completely different than when you have 60 athletes or whatever waiting for your programming, and then you have to focus on yourself too somehow. So just let someone else take care of the things that have already, even if they have the same amount of knowledge, even if they have even less experience with you as a coach or anything like that. It's not even about that. It's more about taking it off of your mental plate so that you can handle everything else well, I think is what you're saying.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And plus I really believe too, though, that like you should be experiencing what your athletes experience too, or at least have had a lot of experience with it. So if I'm in the gym just goofing off doing what I feel like, why should I expect any of my lifters to be held accountable and do what they're being told? That would be like me saying, do as I say, not as I do, or whatever. It kind of defeats the purpose of, hey, like I'm a coach and I'm doing a good job, but I don't actually work hard or do any of these things myself.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, if you're not coachable as a person, then you shouldn't be a coach probably, because how are you going to respond to people criticizing you or telling you or asking you if they can do something different this time or whatever? Because if you're not coachable, you're not receptive to information and getting better probably. And
Absolutely.
therefore you have to learn what it's like to do that so that you can tell other people how to become that as well. So if you get a client that comes in, if you're a coach and you find that they're not coachable, what are you going to do about it? You're not going to just keep throwing things at them until they just cancel with you. You're going to work around their life and figure it out. And so if you're not coachable, you learn how to do it over time. And part of that is sort of educating yourself on the process and going through the process, like Les is saying. I think that's a big part of it too, is that having a real person as a coach, not necessarily talking about like AI stuff or whatever, but someone who's somewhat in your same shoes, in that they're busy, they know what it's like to be stressed out. They're not in college and just making a quick buck off of this. People that are actually trying to help and make it a career out of it because it's a huge thing to them to help other people is a big part of this to me, in that they understand where you're coming from and know how to adjust to real people's lives.
Yeah, being relatable as a coach or as a client, I feel like that's really the biggest key here with the whole coaching athlete relationship thing. I feel like I do a pretty good job connecting with my athletes because I've been through a lot. I've experienced like crazy busy schedules, open schedules. I've had a lot of injuries, so I know how to relate to people with that. Mental trauma stuff, whatever it may be, I've gone through it. So I know how to relate to people on how to coach them through different phases of life along with their lifting, because I've been there and I've done that. So it helps to have somebody that you can relate these things to, and not just have someone that's going to just like scream down your throat, like, this is what you need to get done all the time. There needs to be a level of
Humanity.
yes. Yes, there needs to be a level of humanity there. A coach is a person too. I think there's sometimes where like we think like we need to be professionals, we need to dehumanize ourselves as much as possible. But I actually really lean into the fact that I want a good relationship with my lifters, and like I want to be able to joke around with them. I want them to be open with me when like things are going tough in their lives and all of these different situations.
Yeah, and I think that there's one difference in the powerlifter side of our business versus more general fitness side of things, or other sort of goals, I guess you could say, is that there's, if you're familiar with powerlifting programming, you're familiar with periodization. So that's when you obviously make changes to your programming based on the time compared to your next meet. So far away might be more volume conditioning, hypertrophy sort of stuff. Whereas when you get closer, you're then expressing or using the new muscle to gain strength and then expressing that strength later. But there's also an idea of periodization in your life as a general fitness client, in which when you have less mental bandwidth to a lot to training, your coach should be able to understand that, for one, and also adjust your training to that season of your life so that you can still flourish both in whatever's taking your mental bandwidth and also your fitness, because it's not taking away from your life.
Yes.
So that's a big part of it, is that periodizing to a certain time period or event or part of your life is a big part of how you know that you have essentially a good coach that understands actual human behavior and lives.
Yeah, if you're not like trying to be the absolute number one in the world, I want all of fitness and all of coaching to add to your life, not take away from. I don't want it to feel like a whole nother job that you have to do. I want it to feel like something that you get to do and that you're excited to do, and you can kind of blow off steam doing it, and it'll make you feel better when everything else feels like it's weighing you down. So I really have been trying to encourage all my athletes to just set up a simple phone call with me when like things seem like they're going awry. Like if they seem like they're stressed out about life or whatever, it's not like you have to give me every single detail of what's going on in your life, but just kind of tell me like, hey, maybe work's like kind of kicking my ass right now, or my girlfriend broke up with me and I'm a little down. Maybe sometimes some of these seasons where we take it easy or cut down your time or whatever is a week or two. But still, like having somebody that can adjust and still keep you going forward, in good times, bad times, whatever, it really does help to know you have somebody that has your back and when to be told to push or pull back and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think a good point you're making there is like, if you're not going for number one or to be just absolutely elite, which we also train absolutely elite, top of the world sort of lifters, but
Mm-hmm.
those people also have actual whole human experiences too. They have jobs, they have issues in their lives and things like that, but they do make certain sacrifices that are
Yep.
above and beyond. And the thing is, almost entirely, you shouldn't be making real sacrifices for just being really fit and feel really good. I think that's a misconception with fitness in general, is that these people that are pretty fit or on cover of magazines or whatever are unrealistic, when really it's not unrealistic. It's sort of a priorities thing, but also a how you view the quote unquote sacrifices you're going to need to make for it. You learn how to cook foods that are actually tasty and still healthy. It may take some sacrifice to get down to ridiculous body fat levels, but most people don't need to do that, and they wouldn't even stay that way for a long time anyway. So it's only unrealistic in the sense that you might think of these people on magazine covers or on Instagram as always being super lean, when they're really just that way for like a day or two for those photo shoots. And then otherwise they're living their life like a
Mm-hmm.
normal person, just with a little bit different structure to their life and how they sort of feed themselves and work out.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of how like for CrossFit, for example, most people when they think CrossFit, they think CrossFit games and these elite athletes that are doing these like crazy feats of fitness and stuff. But if you just go to like a local CrossFit gym, you'll find that there's like 80-year-old women and like kids that are like squatting to a box and doing like super simple, super scalable movements just to kind of add to their life. And that's what fitness, I feel like what happens in fitness is people just they look at that top bodybuilder or that top power lifter or that top CrossFitter, and that's what they relate fitness to, instead of just like, okay, wait, maybe this can be scaled to fit into my life. That's when a coach can kind of step in, an experienced coach that is, and kind of explain to you that like you don't have to make all these crazy sacrifices to make progress. But then again, if you are at that very top 1%, you may have to make some sacrifices for that. But that's not 99% of people.
I think it's probably important for us to talk about, how do we determine if we're on a call with you before you become an athlete of ours, if you even need a coach? I think one is that if we're on a call with you and you're considering it, you probably do because you're experiencing some things. But less specifically, what are some of the attributes you find people going through or experiencing when they decide they need to have a coach? Like what are the things that are actually perfect setup for, needing coaching, I guess?
In most cases, people just kind of stall on. I'm going to use a lot of strength references here since that's typically who I work with. But basically, like they just kind of stall in progress, and they haven't hit a PR in a really long time. Another common thing that I see is they get injured very frequently, or not even necessarily injured, but tweaked. They just always constantly have something that's bothering them, and they don't know how to objectively program or train around it to where they can like make that progress again. A big problem is that they just simply train to entertain themselves, like we talked about earlier. They just know, okay, like I'm not getting anywhere. I'm just doing what I feel like doing, and I'm not really being objective about this. And then a lot of other times, it's just like they just need some level of accountability and support, which is huge. If you aren't really holding yourself accountable, you're going to just kind of stick with that same like theme of not making progress. So I would say those are the main things for me.
And I think that, since you went to the strength, I can go into sort of more of a general fitness realm of things with, I like to work with people that are highly motivated people, obviously, just like anyone else does with
Yes,
any other job ever.
absolutely.
But those highly motivated people that are more into general fitness or just wanting to see some sort of fat loss or general strength, whatever it may be, those are the type of people that are generally excelling in one other area of their life that's really important to them, but they're not confident in the way they look or the way they feel. So confidence is a huge thing. You may be excelling extremely well in your job. Your family life may be going well, but you may not feel good internally, both in pain and also just confidence and general self-view. How you look at yourself in the mirror may, stress you out, things along those lines. So if you can take your high performance life elsewhere from family or job and then get the high performance sort of body, and performance is very subjective on what that even means, but it could be improving your body fat levels to a healthy range, improving your muscle to make sure that you age well and that you're always mobile and always strong. Things like that are really important. And if you're feeling like, you're not quite getting enough out of your exercise, or you need some help figuring out what to do for being over 35 versus just throwing anything into your life for fitness as you're a 20-year-old and you can just sort of look great no matter what. Those are the type of things that you look for when it comes to, do I need to be coached in this stuff? If you have a personal trainer, that's obviously a good sign that you need to coach. And you have to ask yourself whether or not the personal trainer is necessary versus someone that's remote like we do, to see if you really need more like accountability and expert programming and expert mindset coaching. Because with a personal trainer, you only get 1 hour of their time in person, and it's mostly them thinking about their other clients, texting some other people, or telling you, you need to do one more rep. So that's not real coaching. And so I don't want to get too negative about other people, obviously, but that's sort of what I know of from people that are getting personal training and things along those lines.
Yeah, and I've even had a situation where, or many situations where I went from personal training people, then I might have moved away, or they moved away, or due to scheduling, they were going to consider transitioning to online coaching. And how I explain it to them is, when they get personal trained by me, we have to line up both of our schedules to be together these certain days, these certain times. You get me during this time. And say if anything happens and our schedules don't line up, then we don't get to see each other that day or this week or whatever. But when you do coach somebody online, and this is again a good online coach, you now have me pretty much all the time. So you can ask me questions whenever, you can call me whenever, you can go work out on your own time. Everything becomes a lot more flexible. If you're going out of town, I can adjust for that super easy. So it's almost like you have a personal trainer just in your pocket at all times, versus when you do have somebody in person, you might feel accountable because they're like staring you in the face as you exercise. But if you have a good online coach, they pretty much have eyes on you all the time anyway. But again, that's just even more easily accessible than just trying to force two schedules to line up perfectly.
Getting schedules to match up is almost impossible if you work normal hours anyway, because it's like everyone wants that 5 or 6 o'clock slot and then go home. There's only so many slots per personal trainer, and that number is 2 from 5 to 6 and 6 to 7. So
Yep.
there's not a lot of room there for adjusting anything. Whereas with an online coach, like you just said, all that stuff, but also it's sort of a group atmosphere. You get this community of other people. Whereas if you have a one-on-one personal trainer, you just have you and them. But there's never like this community aspect, which is one of the things that CrossFit does incredibly well, is they created a community part of it that holds people accountable, makes it actually enjoyable. And that's what we sort of strive to do with our online coaching as well, through our community, things along those lines.
Oh, and I wanted to add in too, one of the biggest reasons that I really knew that I needed Tyler to coach me is because I know that I need to do certain hip movements, core movements, just simply because my back, my hip, my shoulders are constantly in just some level of pain. And I know that I need to do certain things to make it better so that I can make that progress. But I might only do it once a week, and then it ends up every other week, and then it ends up once a month, and I just don't really do it. So I need somebody that's going to specifically tell me, like, hey, no, like, do these core movements, do these hip movements, do these shoulder movements, whatever it may be, so that I'm not in pain. You just aren't going to do all of the mobility, stability, supplemental work that you need to do to get yourself out of pain and rehab things back to normal. You're just not going to do it without somebody or some level of guidance.
Feeling injured or in pain usually needs some sort of expert eye. That doesn't necessarily mean like a doctor of physical therapy like I am. It doesn't mean that I'm the only type of person that can help you with that stuff. A lot of things regress back to their mean. In other words, they regress back to being normal and not in pain over time. But to get things back faster and make sure you're performing at your best, it does help to have someone who knows what they're talking about. And to be blunt, most coaches don't know shit about rehabbing injuries or avoiding them through intelligent programming. A lot of them will be like afraid to load you and afraid to progress you. And that's the same thing for a lot of physical therapists in clinic, is that they'll have you doing yellow TheraBand rehab exercises when you squat 600 pounds and stuff like that. So it's not realistic. It all has to be an actual expert in both strength, fitness, and rehab to get to the point where the person is able to program you rehab exercises within your normal workouts without you really even noticing. Some people may need something outside of the gym to help with mobility and things like that, of course, but it should only be like 15 other minutes in your day, not a whole thing. Your training specifically in the gym should take care of things if they just know how to prescribe exercise correctly. You'll see a lot of unqualified individuals selling quote unquote corrective exercises, which for all intents and purposes is completely fake and not a real thing at all, medically or in fitness. You'd have to ask yourself, what are they actually correcting? And there's not really a valid answer to that. So if you see someone selling that, they're generally kind of full of shit, selling some sort of like, course or whatever, which, hats off to them. It's fine. But if you want something that's really useful, it's more so a real coaching situation where they know your work life and your other activities during the day and things like that to get you to where you really need to be.
I think it's important to really put a star on the fact that if somebody does know what they're doing, they're going to just implement that into your programming, and it just kind of feels like part of your workout. It doesn't feel like extra homework all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a reason Les and I are working together in this company anyway, is that he knows how to write very effective, safe, and enjoyable programs. But even if a client does get injured, because it does happen, it's not something like injury avoidance is more so risk reduction than it is actual getting rid of the risk at all. It's impossible to do that. Things just do happen. But if someone does get that injury or has a nagging pain, we have an actual highly qualified medical professional on our team, me, that knows how to resolve these things without telling you to stop doing what you're doing. So for our powerlifters out there, I wouldn't tell you to stop squatting because squatting hurts. There's a completely different idea behind that for one, mental resilience, but also just getting the tissues to understand that you can squat safely. There's an entirely different idea behind someone who knows exercise for real versus a therapist or a chiropractor or whomever, a doctor that doesn't exercise and just tells people to stop doing it. So you need an actual expert on your team of coaches to resolve actual problems that you have. And that's why we're here.
Yeah, and it is pretty cool to be able to just collaborate back and forth, since like me and Tyler are both really good at, I would say, both the strength and the rehab stuff. But since allowing me to tailor more to the strength and allowing him to tailor more to the rehab stuff, it makes her a really cool team where now I can operate at 100% capacity and he can operate at 100% capacity, instead of like I'm trying to water down the strength to fit in some of this rehab stuff, and then he might have to do the same. So it's really nice to be able to just find a team that can kind of handle every aspect of your fitness all in one, instead of having to like outsource all of these different people.
And so, yeah, to sort of close out our ideas here, one really strong argument I think I have for why someone should get a coach, or why really everyone should have some sort of coaching in something. And this doesn't necessarily have to be in fitness, but this is the context we're doing it in. Think about the best athletes in the world and who they have on their team. and why they really have them there. Take a Michael Jordan or whatever top athlete of all time you want to take, and consider that they've had dozens of coaches, for one, over their lifetimes, of course, but also in any particular moment during their career, they would have multiple coaches for multiple skills and things along those lines. So despite being literally the best athletes in the world, they're still having to consolidate information and consolidate effort and accountability and support through other people. So you may be saying, well, I'm not making millions of dollars as an athlete, so I don't need coaches. That's not really the point. The point is that despite knowing everything and knowing how to do things, they still need help with the extra stuff that keeps them going and keeps them moving in the right direction to stay great and keep getting better despite being already awesome.
Absolutely.
So if you're considering getting any coaching after listening to this podcast, it would be awesome if you would visit our website, FortitudeRx.com, or you can contact us through the links in the show notes. We hope that you have enjoyed this, and we hope that we can work with you one day to help you reach your goals. We will talk to you next time.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of FortitudeRx Radio. You're officially one step closer to conquering your goals and living your best life. For more info or to connect with your hosts, check out FortitudeRx.com. We'll see you next time.